Agnes Miller and her husband had just rescued a young girl named Maya from the streets on Christmas Eve, bringing warmth and hope into both their lives. But their moment of peace would be short-lived. Just as they thought they had finally brought Maya to safety, a shocking turn of events would shatter their newfound peace. What began as a simple act of kindness would soon force this elderly couple to risk everything to protect the child they'd sworn to keep safe. Before we dive into part 2 of this story, comment where you're watching from, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The first day of the new year dawned crisp and bright, but Agnes Miller barely noticed the sunlight streaming through her living room windows. Her attention was fixed on the clock ticking on the mantel and the empty driveway beyond. Every few minutes she'd pause in her pacing to glance outside, hoping to see the car that would bring Maya, the young girl who was about to join their family after she and her husband Rowan had rescued her from the streets just last Christmas. Rowan was out in the backyard, the loud whir of the lawnmower drowning out the world around him. She could see wisps of cigarette smoke rising above the fence, evidence of his own nervous habit. Agnes wanted to call out to him, to share her anxiety and excitement, but she knew he wouldn't hear her over the noise. As she resumed her pacing in the living room, sometimes peeking at the kitchen's window, Agnes's mind raced with questions and doubts. Would Maya like it here? Would she feel comfortable in their home? How would they handle the challenges that were sure to come with fostering a child who had been through so much? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, mixing with the anticipation that had been building for weeks. The sudden blare of a car horn cut through her thoughts, making her heart skip a beat. Agnes looked at the clock. It was 3:28 p.m. She rushed to the window, her breath catching in the cold, as she saw a silver car pull up in front of the house. This was it. Maya was here. "Rowan, they're here," she called out, forgetting for a moment that he couldn't possibly hear her. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Agnes smoothed down her shirt and made her way to the front door. As she stepped outside, she saw Loris, the social worker, helping a small girl in a bright red cloth out of the car. Agnes recognized Maya immediately. The 8-year-old girl looked healthier and brighter than she had on that cold Christmas night. Though still small, with a swelling in her belly, her face now had a touch of color, and her wide, observant eyes seemed to take in everything at once. Maya's posture was more relaxed, a hint of curiosity sparking in her gaze as she looked up at the house that would soon be her home. "Hello, Maya," Agnes said, trying to keep her voice warm and steady despite her nerves. "Welcome to your new home." "Hi, Mrs. Miller," Maya said, her voice quiet and a bit shy. Agnes had hoped the girl might feel more at ease after their time together last Christmas, but she couldn't blame her. Moving into a new home was an entirely different experience, intimidating even for a young girl like Maya. Loris smiled encouragingly at Maya. "Remember what we talked about, sweetie. This is your new home with Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They're very excited to have you here." Maya nodded silently, her small hand clutching the strap of a worn backpack. Agnes's heart ached at the sight, but she kept her smile in place, determined to make this transition as smooth as possible. "Why don't we go inside?" Agnes suggested gently. "I can show you around and then we can get you settled in." As they walked toward the house, Agnes noticed how Maya's eyes darted around, lingering on the trash bin, as if remembering what had happened there just a week ago. She seemed to be taking in every detail of her new surroundings. Agnes hoped that somewhere in that cautious gaze there might also be a glimmer of hope for the future they could build together. Once inside, Agnes began showing Maya around, her voice bright and warm as she pointed out each room. "This is our living room," she said, gesturing to the cozy space filled with well-worn armchairs and shelves lined with books. "And through here is the kitchen, where we spend a lot of time cooking and chatting together. You might remember having dinner here, especially that leg of ham you enjoyed." Maya followed silently, her eyes wide as she took in every detail. When they reached the large window overlooking the backyard, Agnes paused. "That's Rowan out there mowing the lawn. He's very excited to meet you too." As if on cue, the lawnmower's roar died down, and Rowan looked up, noticing them at the window. He waved. a warm smile breaking across his weathered face. "Let's go upstairs now," Agnes said, leading the way. "I have a special surprise for you." As they reached the second floor, Agnes opened a door to reveal a bedroom that had been carefully prepared for Maya's arrival. The walls were a soft shade of lavender, and a cozy-looking bed was piled high with fluffy pillows. A bookshelf stood in one corner, filled with colorful titles, while a desk by the window held art supplies and a small lamp. "This is your room, Maya," Agnes said softly, watching the girl's face for a reaction. "We wanted you to have a space that's all your own." For the first time since her arrival, Maya's expression changed. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she took a hesitant step into the room, her hand reaching out to touch the soft comforter on the bed. "It's for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Agnes nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "All of it. The clothes in the closet, the toys, the books. They're all for you." Maya turned to look at Agnes, a mix of emotions playing across her young face. "Thank you," she said softly, and Agnes could see the first hints of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. As they made their way back downstairs, they found Rowan had come inside. He stood in the living room, his large frame seeming to fill the space. Despite his imposing size, his expression was gentle as he looked at Maya. "Hello there, Maya," he greeted, his voice gruff but kind. "Welcome to our home. We hope you'll find comfort here with us. Now, we do have a few house rules. Nothing too scary, just things to help us all get along and stay safe. Think you can handle that?" Maya nodded solemnly, her eyes never leaving Rowan's face. "I promise to be good," she said quietly. "I won't break your trust." Agnes felt her heart swell with emotion. She knelt down beside Maya, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, you don't have to be perfect. We accept you just as you are, right, Rowan? This is your home now, and we want you to feel comfortable here." Rowan stretched a smile. "Yes, and we can talk later about it and as we go." Loris, who had been observing the interactions, stepped forward. "That's right, Maya. Remember what we talked about. This is a safe place for you to heal and grow. Mr. and Mrs. Miller are here to help you." As Maya nodded again in her innocence, this time with a bit more confidence, Loris turned to Agnes and Rowan. "There are a few things we need to discuss about Maya's care," she said, "particularly regarding her diet." They all gathered around the kitchen table as Loris began explaining Maya's nutritional needs. "Maya is still recovering from severe malnourishment," she said with a serious tone. "The doctor has prescribed a specific diet to help rebuild her health. She'll need high-protein foods, nutrient-dense superfoods, and we should minimize processed or sugary items. It's also essential that she takes her vitamins and supplements regularly until the doctor confirms she's fully recovered." Agnes and Rowan listened intently, nodding their understanding. But Loris wasn't finished. "There's something else you need to be aware of," she continued. "Due to Maya's past trauma and chronic starvation, she sometimes struggles with eating. She may perceive certain foods as unpleasant or even inedible, regardless of their actual quality. This is a result of her experiences living on the streets and, having to find food in less than ideal places. That's also the reason why those supplements and vitamins are important for her." Agnes recalled the image of Maya with stained rubbish liquid on her clothes that Christmas Eve, and it broke her heart. "We won't force her to eat or finish her plate if she's not ready," Loris added gently. "I think it's best not to push and risk bringing up any past trauma." Agnes felt her heart breaking for the young girl sitting quietly beside her. She reached out and gently took Maya's hand. "We'll keep this in mind. Maya can recover at her own pace. We'll do everything we can to help you, sweetheart. Whatever you need, we're here for you." Rowan nodded in agreement, his expression serious. "We'll make sure you have everything you need to get healthy and strong," he added. As Loris presented them with the necessary paperwork, Agnes and Rowan signed without hesitation, cementing their commitment to Maya's well-being. As they finished, Agnes couldn't help but feel a mix of determination and hope. Loris gathered the legal documents, carefully placing them in her folder before excusing herself. As her car disappeared down the street, a quiet stillness settled over the house. Agnes, Rowan and Maya stood together in the living room, the weight of their new reality beginning to sink in around them. Rowan was the first to break the silence. "Well," he said, clapping his hands together, "I think this calls for a celebration. How about a BBQ for dinner?" Agnes raised an eyebrow. "A BBQ in January?" Rowan grinned. "Why not? It's a special day, and I make a mean barbecue chicken." He winked at Maya, who was watching the exchange with curious eyes. "What do you say, kiddo? Up for some grilled goodness?" A small smile tugged at the corners of Maya's mouth as she nodded. "Excellent," Rowan exclaimed. He turned to Agnes, a mischievous glint in his eye. "And maybe we could have a little red wine to go with it? To toast our new family?" Agnes laughed, shaking her head. "Nice try, mister. You promised to quit, remember? We're sticking to sparkling cider." Rowan let out an exaggerated sigh, but his eyes twinkled with mirth. Can't blame a man for trying. As they bantered, Maya watched from the doorway, a small smile playing on her lips. It was clear she was observing their interaction closely, perhaps marveling at the easy affection between them. Rowan moved to the refrigerator, pulling out various ingredients. "All right, let's get this marinade started. Maya, want to help?" Maya looked up at Agnes, who nodded encouragingly. "Go on," she said softly. "Rowan's quite the chef. You might learn a thing or two." Maya nodded eagerly, stepping into the kitchen. Rowan began explaining each ingredient as he measured them out, showing Maya how to mix them together. "Now, the secret to a good marinade is balance," he said, pouring olive oil and lemon juice into a bowl. Sweet, salty, tangy, it all has to work together. As they worked, Rowan regaled Maya with stories from his youth, including tales of his old boxing days. "I wasn't half bad, you know," he said, flexing his arm playfully. "Could have gone pro if I hadn't met Agnes and fallen head over heels." Maya giggled at his antics, her earlier shyness beginning to melt away. Agnes, watching from the counter where she was preparing a salad, felt a warmth spread through her chest. The scene before her was so domestic, so normal. It was everything she had hoped for when they decided to become foster parents. Once the meat was marinating in the fridge, Agnes turned to Maya. "Why don't we go upstairs and unpack your things? We can make your room feel more like home." Maya nodded, following Agnes up the stairs. As they entered the bedroom, Maya's eyes once again widened at the sight of all the new things. "Is it really all mine?" she asked softly, her hand reaching out to touch the soft comforter on the bed. Agnes knelt down beside her, meeting her eyes. "Of course it is, sweetheart. You deserve every comfort and joy this home can bring. And remember, you don't have to be afraid here. It might take some time to get used to everything, but you can always come to me if you need anything, okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya finally replied. Surprised but deeply moved, Agnes returned the embrace, holding Maya close. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." For a moment it seemed like she might say something more, but instead she simply wrapped her arms around Agnes in a tight hug. Agnes had secretly hoped the girl might call her something more familial, but she kept the thought to herself, not wanting to put any extra pressure on her. As they began unpacking Maya's few possessions, placing them carefully around the room, Maya's demeanor slowly changed. She became more animated, pointing out where she wanted things, even sharing a few stories about some of her treasured items. At one point Maya paused, holding a small, worn, stuffed animal. "My dad, he gave me this," she said quietly. Before he went to the army and everything went bad." Agnes felt her heart constrict at the pain in Maya's voice. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "It's okay to miss him, you know, and to keep the good memories." Maya nodded, carefully placing the stuffed animal on her new bed. I think he'd be happy I'm here with you and Rowan," she said softly. As they finished unpacking, Agnes could see that Maya was starting to look tired. The emotional toll of the day was clearly catching up with her. "Why don't you rest for a bit? Take a little nap if you'd like, Agnes suggested gently. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. We'll call you when dinner's ready. Maya nodded, already climbing onto the bed. As Agnes turned to leave, she heard Maya's quiet voice. Thank you. For everything, Mrs. Miller. Agnes smiled warmly. You're very welcome, sweetheart. As she made her way back downstairs, Agnes felt a mix of emotions, hope, love, and a fierce protectiveness for the child who was quickly becoming a part of their family. Agnes descended the stairs, her heart full from the tender moment she'd shared with Maya. As she entered the kitchen, she could see Rowan through the window, busy in the backyard. He was carrying the BBQ grill, setting it up for their celebratory dinner. The sight brought a smile to her face. It was such a normal, domestic scene, a stark contrast to the emotional roller coaster of the day. Turning her attention to dinner preparations, Agnes began mixing a salad dressing. She whisked the ingredients together, the familiar motions soothing her nerves. Once satisfied with the consistency, she covered the bowl with cling wrap and placed it in the refrigerator. As she stood at the sink washing her hands, a movement outside caught her eye. Through the kitchen window, she spotted a man walking up their driveway. He had emerged from the direction of their neighbor's house, where a black Jeep was parked. Agnes frowned, finding it odd that he hadn't simply parked in front of their house. The man's attire drew her attention next. He was dressed in a worn army uniform that had seen better days. There was something about his purposeful stride that set Agnes on edge. The sharp rap of knuckles on wood echoed through the house. Agnes dried her hands quickly, a sense of unease settling in her stomach. "Rowan!" she called out, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. "Rowan, someone's at the door, a man in an army uniform," she said. Rowan appeared at the back door, wiping his hands on a cloth. He must have sensed the tension in Agnes's voice because his expression immediately turned serious. Together, they approached the front door cautiously. Agnes opened the door, Rowan standing protectively close behind her. The man on their porch stood straight, his posture military rigid, despite the shabby state of his uniform. "Can we help you?" Agnes asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man's eyes, hard and intense, bore into hers. "My name is Michael J. Carter," he said, his voice carrying a hint of barely contained emotion. "I'm Maya's father." Agnes felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She glanced at Rowan, seeing her own surprise mirrored in his face. Michael continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I just found out Maya was placed in foster care. Her mother, Meta, was recently arrested. She told me where to find my daughter." Rowan stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Carter, this is quite unexpected. We weren't informed of any planned visits from Maya's biological family." Michael's jaw clenched, a flash of anger crossing his face. "I don't need permission to see my own child. I want to see Maya now." Rowan's brow furrowed as he processed Michael's words. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice level but firm, "how exactly did you get our address?" Michael's eyes narrowed, a hint of defiance in his tone. "I found it at the social services office. I demanded it from them. Maya is still my child, and I have every right to see her." Agnes and Rowan exchanged a concerned glance. This was highly irregular, and potentially a breach of protocol. Michael took a step forward, his frustration mounting. "I insist on seeing Maya now. It's my right as her father." Rowan stood his ground, blocking the doorway with his body. His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath his words. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're eager to see Maya, but we can't allow you inside right now. For Maya's safety and well-being, we need to follow proper procedures." "Safety?" Michael scoffed, his voice rising. "I'm her father. You can't keep me from my own child." Rowan held up a placating hand. "No one's trying to keep you from Maya permanently, Mr. Carter, but this isn't the right way to go about it. We need to set up a proper meeting through social services. They need to be involved in arranging any visits." Michael's face flushed with anger, his fists clenching at his sides. "You have no right to make these decisions. Maya is my daughter." "We're her legal guardians right now," Rowan replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "And it's our responsibility to ensure her safety and follow the proper procedures. I'm going to have to ask you to leave now, Mr. Carter. We can contact social services and set up a proper meeting if needed." For a moment it seemed Michael might argue further. His eyes darted past Rowan, searching for a glimpse of Maya. But something in Rowan's steady gaze made him think better of it. With a final glare, Michael turned on his heel. As he stormed off towards his jeep, they could hear him muttering threats under his breath. As the black jeep roared away, Agnes and Rowan closed the door and exchanged worried glances. Their peaceful New Year's Day had suddenly become much more complicated. Agnes and Rowan watched him go, their hearts racing. As the sound of the jeep's engine faded into the distance, they turned to each other, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. "We need to call Loris," Agnes said softly, her voice shaky. This isn't right." Rowan nodded, his arm wrapping protectively around Agnes's shoulders. "We will, but first, we need to check on Maya. She must have heard some of that." Just as the old man said that, they found Maya standing at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide with a mix of longing and fear. Was that my dad?" she asked, her voice small. "No." Rowan nodded, his expression softening as he looked at Maya. "The man claimed he was. Did you see his face, Maya?" Maya shook her head. "But I heard his voice when I was in my room. I think it was him." Agnes and Rowan glanced at each other again, and the woman said, "Likely it was, but don't worry, sweetheart, we'll figure this out. If he really is your father, we'll see him again and arrange a safe way for you to see him. But for now, let's focus on our barbecue, okay?" Maya nodded, though her face still showed signs of confusion and sadness. Agnes reached out, gently squeezing her shoulder. "It's going to be all right. We're here for you, no matter what." After the tense encounter with Michael, Rowan returned to the backyard, determined to resume the preparations for their celebratory BBQ. Maya followed him outside, her eyes still wide with a mix of emotions from overhearing the confrontation. Agnes watched from the kitchen window, her heart heavy with concern, but warming at the sight of Maya's curiosity about Rowan's activities. Rowan, noticing Maya's hovering around the grill with interest look, approached her. "Hey, Maya, want to hear a funny story while I get the grill ready? Let me tell you about the time I accidentally set my eyebrows on fire during a barbecue." Maya's eyes widened with glee, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Really? How did that happen?" Rowan grinned, launching into the tale. "Well, it was my first time grilling on my own. I may have been a bit overzealous with the lighter fluid. When I lit the match, whoosh!" He mimed an explosion with his hands. Next thing I knew, I was doing a dance around the yard, trying to pat out my flaming eyebrows. Maya's giggles, though soft, were like music to Agnes and Rowan's ears. For a moment, the tension from earlier seemed to melt away, replaced by the simple joy of shared laughter. As he spoke, Rowan realized he needed to check on the charcoal supply. "Talking about setting up fire, let me just grab the briquettes from the garage," he told Maya with a wink. Rowan made his way to the storage closet in the garage, rummaging through the shelves. His brow furrowed as he realized they were running low on charcoal. "Looks like we're a bit short on briquettes," he called out to Agnes, who had followed him to the garage door. "Do you think the store will be open on New Year's Day?" Agnes asked, worry creeping into her voice. Rowan nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'll run out and check. There's bound to be at least one place open. We can't let a little thing like this ruin our celebration, can we?" Rowan grabbed his keys and, "All right, I'll be back in a jiffy with those briquettes. You two hold down the fort while I'm gone." Agnes nodded, coming out to join them in the yard. "All right, but hurry back. We don't want dinner to be too late." As Rowan drove away to buy more briquettes, Agnes busied herself in the laundry closet, folding some of Maya's new clothes. She was lost in thought when she heard a knock at the door. Maya was in the living room, playing with her new plush on the sofa. "I'll get it," Maya called out, her voice carrying a hint of childish excitement at the prospect of being helpful. Before Agnes could respond, she heard the door open, followed by a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. "Maya, sweetheart, it's Dad." Agnes rushed to the front door, her heart pounding. She found Maya in Michael's arms, tears streaming down the girl's face as she clung to her father. "Dad, you come back?" Michael looked up, his eyes meeting Agnes's with a mixture of defiance and triumph. "I'm sorry," he said, though his tone suggested he was anything but I'm taking my daughter home now." Agnes stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Carter, please, this isn't right. We need to go through proper channels. If you take Maya now, we'll be in trouble with social services." Michael's jaw clenched. "It's just for a few nights. I'm on leave from duty. Just for 3 days to see Maya. If she's doing all right after her mother. Gone. I don't have much time before I have to return to the army." He turned to Maya, his voice softening. "You want to come with your old man, don't you, sweetheart? We can catch up, just the two of us, like old times." Maya looked between Agnes and her father, torn between the safety of her new home and the pull of her past. "Can I?" she asked Agnes, her eyes pleading. "Just for a little while?" Agnes felt her heart breaking, knowing she couldn't forcibly keep Maya from her father, but also fearing for the girl's safety. "Maya, sweetie, are you sure? We don't know where." "I'll be okay," Maya interrupted, her grip on Michael tightening. "I promise I'll come back." Michael nodded, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. "See? She wants to come. I'll bring her back tomorrow, no harm done." Before Agnes could formulate a response, Michael was already guiding Maya towards his waiting jeep. As they walked away, Agnes called out desperately, "Wait! Where are you taking her? Please tell me where you live." But her words were lost as Michael quickly ushered Maya into the car and closed the door. The engine roared to life, and as the jeep pulled away, Agnes realized with a sinking feeling that she had no idea where Michael was taking Maya. She stood in the doorway, her mind reeling, watching helplessly as the jeep disappeared down the street. The weight of her oversight hit her hard. She hadn't gotten Michael's address or his number. How could she have let this happen? She stumbled back into the house, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone. For a moment she hesitated, torn between calling Rowan or Loris. Both needed to know what had happened, but who should she contact first? After a brief internal struggle, Agnes decided to call Rowan. He was Maya's foster father, and she needed his support now more than ever. The phone rang several times before Rowan answered. "Hey, Agnes, I'm at the store now. They had the briquettes." "Rowan," Agnes cut him off, her voice trembling. "You need to come home right away. It's Maya." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. When Rowan spoke again, his voice was tense with concern. "What happened? Is she okay?" Agnes took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Michael came back. He took Maya. I couldn't stop him. She wanted to go with him, and I didn't get his address, Rowan. I don't know where he's taken her." She heard Rowan inhale sharply. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice a mix of worry and determination. "Don't do anything until I get there. We'll figure this out together." As she ended the call, Agnes sank onto the couch, her mind whirling with possibilities. Should she call Loris now? The police? What if Michael had lied about bringing Maya back tomorrow? What if they never saw her again? The minutes crawled by like hours as Agnes waited for Rowan to return. She paced the living room, alternating between staring out the window and checking her phone, hoping against hope for a message from Maya or Michael. Finally, she heard the sound of tires on gravel. Rowan's car pulled into the driveway, and he was out of the vehicle before the engine had fully stopped. As he burst through the door, Agnes rushed into his arms, the events of the past hour spilling out of her in a torrent of words and tears. "I was so stupid. This old brain's too slow to get his contact information or address." Agnes cried. Rowan held her tightly, his own face etched with worry. Hey, you're not stupid, Agnes. You were anxious. We'll find her," he said firmly, though Agnes could hear the undercurrent of fear in his voice. "We need to call Loris," Agnes said anxiously, her voice shaky. This isn't right." Agnes insisted, reaching for her phone. Rowan caught her hand, his expression conflicted. Wait, Agnes, if we report this now, they might think we're unfit to be foster parents. We've only had Maya for a day, and she's already gone missing under our care. They could take her away from us permanently. Agnes pulled back, frustration evident in her voice. We can't just do nothing, Rowan. Maya could be in danger. As they argued, a thought struck Agnes. Our son, she said suddenly. He's back from his family's holiday, and he has connections in the military. Maybe he can help us find out more about Michael. Without waiting for Rowan's response, Agnes dialed her son's number, her fingers trembling as she held the phone to her ear. When he answered, she turned on the speaker so Rowan could listen. She launched into a frantic explanation. Mom, slow down, her son's voice came through the speaker. What's going on? Who's Maya? Agnes took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Maya is our foster daughter. We just got her today. But her biological father, Michael J. Carter, he came and took her. He's in the military, or at least he was. Please, can you use your connections to find out anything about him? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Foster daughter. Mum, I didn't know you and Dad had become foster parents. It's recent, it's a long story, Agnes explained quickly. Please, son, we're desperate. We need to find Maya. Her son's voice softened. Okay, Mom, I'm surprised, but I'll do what I can. Give me all the information you have on this Michael J. Carter. Agnes relayed everything she knew, Michael's full name, his claim of recent military service, and the fact that Maya's mother, Meta, had recently been arrested. As she spoke, she could hear her son typing in the background. All right, he said when she finished. I'll reach out to some contacts and see what I can find out. It might take some time, but I'll call you as soon as I have any information. Thank you, love, Agnes breathed, relief flooding her voice. We appreciate it more than you know. And, Mom, are you sure you don't want to contact the authorities? Her son's voice came through the speaker. Agnes looked at Rowan, who shook his head slightly. Not yet, she replied. Just, please hurry. Okay, but you owe me the full story, Mom, Dad. Yes, of course, Agnes and Rowan answered in unison. As she ended the call, Agnes turned to Rowan, who had been listening intently. He's going to help, she said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Rowan nodded, pulling Agnes close. That's good, but we can't just sit here and wait. We need to do something, Agnes. Maya's out there. Agnes nodded against his chest, her mind racing. You're right, we can't just wait, but where do we start? What do you have in mind? It was a brief pause until Rowan came with the idea. The campsite, he said, already moving towards the car, where Maya's mother used to stay. Maybe we can find something there, a clue to where Michael might have taken her. Agnes considered for a moment before following him. You're right, she agreed, but we need to be careful. We don't want to make things worse. The drive to the campsite was tense, filled with worried silence and unspoken fears. When they arrived, Agnes practically leapt from the car, her eyes scanning the area frantically. The campsite was empty without a single caravan. It was a mess of abandoned tents and scattered trash. Agnes looked around the area, at the campsite and the far-stretching neighborhood, searching for any glimpse of the black jeep, but she couldn't find it. Desperate, she began sifting through the debris, ignoring Rowan's concerned looks. As she dug through a pile of rubbish, her hand brushed against something, a backpack hidden beneath the trash. With trembling fingers, Agnes pulled it out. Inside, she found a collection of Maya's old belongings, her small, thin pink clothes from the day Agnes had found her in the front yard, digging through the rubbish, the worn shoes stained with garbage juice, and at the bottom, a torn black and white photo. Rowan, she called out, her voice tight with emotion. Look at this. It's the picture of the man. He's indeed her father. Rowan peered over her shoulder, his eyes widening as he spotted something scrawled on the back of the photo. Agnes, there's a writing on the back. Is that an address? Agnes nodded, hope blooming in her chest for the first time since Maya had been taken. It's not much, she said, but it's a start. As they climbed back into the car, the photo clutched tightly in Agnes's hand. They knew they were embarking on a journey that could change everything. The car's headlights cut through the gathering dusk as Rowan navigated the winding mountain roads. Agnes sat beside him, her eyes glued to the GPS on her phone, guiding them towards the address they had found. What should have been an hour-long drive seemed to stretch on endlessly. The tension in the car was palpable, broken only by the occasional direction from Agnes or the crackle of the radio as they lost and regained signal. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" Rowan asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as they took another sharp turn. Agnes nodded, though doubt crept into her voice. "The GPS says we're on track, it's just so remote up here." As they climbed higher into the mountains, the roads became narrower and more treacherous. Trees loomed on either side, their branches creating eerie shadows in the fading light. Suddenly Agnes's phone rang, startling them both. It was her son. "Mum," his voice came through, tinged with concern. "I found some information about Michael J. Carter. There are several men by that name, but one recently discharged from the military under troubling circumstances." Agnes's heart raced. "What do you mean, troubling?" "The details are vague, but it involved some kind of moral misconduct. It was serious enough for him to be discharged, but the specifics are classified." Agnes felt her chest tighten, her worst fears seeming to materialize. "Oh God," she whispered. "Maya." "Mom, where are you?" her son asked, worry evident in his tone. "Maybe you should let the authorities handle this." Agnes looked at Rowan, who had been listening intently. He nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the situation. "We're close," Agnes told her son. "We'll call for help once we know exactly where Maya is. Thank you for the information." As she ended the call, Rowan spoke up. "Agnes, maybe we should—" "No," she cut him off, her voice firm. "We're not turning back now. Maya needs us." Rowan nodded, understanding the determination in his wife's eyes. They drove on in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts and fears. Finally, after what felt like hours, they spotted a small, secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. Rowan parked the car a short distance away, killing the engine and lights. "This must be it," Agnes whispered, her old heart pounding so loudly she was sure Rowan could hear it. They sat for a moment, gathering their courage. The cabin looked dark and foreboding in the twilight, surrounded by an eerie stillness that sent chills down Agnes's spine. "What's the plan?" Rowan asked, his voice low and serious. Agnes took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "We need to be careful. Michael could be dangerous. I'll text Loris and give her our location. We should ask her to send the police, but tell them to approach quietly. We don't want to provoke Michael if he's unstable." As Agnes sent the text, Rowan got out of the car, his eyes scanning the area. Agnes joined him, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. They exchanged a look, years of partnership allowing them to communicate without words. With cautious steps, they approached the cabin, every sense on high alert. As they drew closer, a faint sound reached their ears, a muffled whimper that could only be Maya. As Agnes and Rowan crept closer to the cabin, the muffled sounds grew clearer. Maya's whimpers were punctuated by a man's voice, angry, slurred, and unmistakably Michael's. Agnes felt a chill run down her spine, her maternal instincts screaming at her to rush in and protect Maya. But Rowan's steady hand on her arm kept her grounded, reminding her of the need for caution. The only light came from a dim yellow bulb around the back of the cabin, casting long, ominous shadows across the overgrown yard. They pressed their ears against the rough wooden walls, straining to make out the words being spoken inside. "You ruined everything," Michael's voice rang out, thick with anger and what sounded like alcohol. "If it weren't for you, your mother wouldn't be in jail. I wouldn't have lost my career. It's all your fault." Maya's response was too quiet to hear, but it seemed to only enrage Michael further. The sound of something shattering made Agnes flinch. Rowan's face was grim as he tested the front door, finding it unlocked. They both knew they couldn't wait any longer. As they entered the cabin, the interior revealed itself in the dim light. Rowan spotted something by the cabin's entrance, a baseball bat. Without a word, he picked it up, testing its weight in his hands, nodding to Agnes. Agnes's breath caught in her throat. The walls were adorned with an array of weapons, guns, knives, even a few swords. The display gave the place an air of menace that made her skin crawl. They inched towards the room where the voices were coming from, tension building with each step. Agnes held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give them away. When they reached the doorway, they hid under the cover of shadow. The scene before them made Agnes's blood run cold. Michael stood over Maya, who was curled up on a disheveled bed. His face was contorted with rage, one hand raised as if to strike. "You ruined everything," Michael shouted, his words slurred with anger and alcohol. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Maya whimpered, trying to make herself smaller. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to," Michael scoffed. "You turned your own mother into the police. How could you do that to us?" Agnes and Rowan stood frozen, shocked by the scene unfolding before them. Michael continued his tirade, his voice rising. "Even though I had to leave for the army, your mother, she's still my wife. It was better for me to know that Meta was happy, even if it was with Darius." "But you," he pointed an accusing finger at Maya, "you had to go and put them both behind bars." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "But they left me," Michael roared. "Do you know what happened to me because of what you did? I was so stressed out in the army, thinking about your mother in jail. I started drinking again. I beat up my partner during a drunken fight. They kicked me out, discharged, my whole career gone." He leaned in closer to Maya, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "And it's all your fault. Everything that's gone wrong in my life is because of you." Maya's quiet voice pleading, "Dad, this isn't you. I remember when you used to be kind. You loved me, Dad." Michael's response was a roar of frustration. "That man is gone. He died the day he left to the army." As Michael's hand began to descend, Rowan burst into the room, his voice booming. "That's enough." Michael whirled around, questions, surprise, and anger flashing across his face. In the moment of distraction, Maya darted past him and clung to Agnes's leg, trembling. "You, how come? How do you come to know my address? Do you bring the police?" Michael snarled, his bloodshot eyes darting between Rowan and Agnes. Agnes held up the photograph in her hand, showing the address. Rowan stood his ground, the bat held firmly in his hands. "Listen, we're here to take her home. There's no police outside." Michael's face twisted into a sneer. "Home? She is home. She's my daughter, and you have no right to her." As he spoke, Michael's hand moved to his waistband, pulling out a gun. Agnes felt her heart stop as the barrel pointed directly at them. "Now," Michael said, his voice dangerously calm, "you're going to leave, without Maya, or things are going to get very ugly." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with fear and the acrid smell of alcohol. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he held the gun, his eyes wild and unfocused. Rowan stood between him and Agnes, who still held Maya protectively. "Michael," Rowan said, his voice calm despite the danger, "you don't want to do this. Think about Maya. Think about what's best for her." Michael's grip on the gun tightened. "What's best for her? I'm her father. I know what's best." As Michael ranted, Agnes whispered urgently to Maya, "When I say go, run for the door as fast as you can. Don't look back, just run." Maya nodded almost imperceptibly, her small body tense and ready. Rowan continued to talk, trying to keep Michael's attention. "We can work this out. There's no need for anyone to get hurt. Just put the gun down, and we can talk about what's best for Maya." For a moment it seemed like Michael might be considering Rowan's words. His arm lowered slightly, uncertainty flashing across his face. Agnes saw her chance. "Now, Maya," she shouted, giving the girl a gentle push towards the door. Maya bolted, her small figure a blur as she dashed for freedom. Michael let out a roar of rage, swinging the gun towards her retreating form. In his anger, his finger squeezed the trigger, sending a bullet into the wall with a deafening crack. Rowan reacted instantly, swinging the baseball bat and knocking the gun from Michael's hand. It skittered across the floor, out of reach. "Run!" Rowan yelled to Agnes. "Get Maya out of here!" Agnes didn't need to be told twice. She raced after Maya, her heart pounding in her ears. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of a struggle as Rowan grappled with Michael. Outside, Agnes found Maya huddled behind a tree, shaking with fear. "It's okay, sweetheart," Agnes soothed, gathering the girl into her arms. "We're going to be all right." Just then, the sight of a cop car flashed through the trees as it approached the cabin. There was no siren, just as Agnes had requested from Loris. A wave of relief washed over her, but she could only hope that Rowan would make it out alive. As the police swarmed the area, Agnes held Maya close, whispering words of comfort. She watched anxiously as officers entered the cabin, emerging moments later with Michael in handcuffs and Rowan following behind, looking battered but triumphant. As the police led a handcuffed Michael to a waiting patrol car, Loris approached Agnes and Maya, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Are you both all right?" she asked, her eyes scanning them for any visible injuries. Agnes nodded, her voice shaky but determined. "We're okay." Loris turned her attention to Maya, kneeling down to meet the girl's eyes. "Maya, sweetheart, you're safe now. These brave people came to help you." Maya looked up at Agnes, then at Rowan, her eyes wide with a mix of emotions. You came for me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rowan stepped closer, wincing slightly from his injuries but managing a warm smile. "Of course we did, kiddo. We're family now, remember?" A police officer approached, notepad in hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, we'll need to take your statements. Can you tell us what happened?" As Agnes recounted the events of the evening, Rowan added details where needed, his hand resting supportively on her shoulder. Maya remained silent, her face buried in Agnes's side, but her grip on Agnes's shirt loosened slightly as she listened to the story of her rescue. When they finished giving their statements, a paramedic came over to check on them. Rowan waved off the offer of medical assistance for his bruises, chuckling softly. "Trust me, this is nothing compared to what I went through in my younger days. You should have seen me after some of my boxing matches." His attempt at lightening the mood worked, drawing a small giggle from Maya. The sound, so unexpected after the tension of the night, made everyone pause. Agnes looked down at Maya, her heart swelling with love and relief. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, stroking the girl's hair. Maya looked up at her, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Mom, can we go home now? I'm tired and hungry." It was the first time she had called her that, and Agnes felt her heart swell with love and protectiveness. Agnes hugged her tighter, feeling as though her heart might burst. "Yes, Maya, we'll go home and get you something to eat." Rowan stepped closer, enveloping both Agnes and Maya in a gentle hug. For a moment, they stood there together, a family united by love and shared experience, the chaos of the rescue fading into the background. As they prepared to leave, Loris approached one last time. "You've all been through a lot tonight," she said, her voice gentle. "I'll be checking in tomorrow to see how you're doing and to discuss next steps. For now, just focus on resting and being together." Agnes nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Loris, for everything." They walked to their car, Maya between them, holding both their hands. Agnes felt a profound sense of rightness. The night had been terrifying, but they had come through it together. The drive back down the mountain was quiet, the adrenaline of the rescue giving way to exhaustion. Maya dozed in the back seat, her small form curled up under Rowan's jacket. Agnes kept glancing back at her, as if afraid she might disappear if she looked away for too long. As they neared the bottom of the mountain, Agnes spotted a small roadside diner, its neon sign a beacon in the darkness. "Rowan," she said softly, "maybe we should stop for something to eat. I don't think any of us have had dinner, and after everything that's happened—" Rowan nodded, sensing her unspoken need to do something normal, to begin the process of healing. He pulled into the diner's parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. As the car came to a stop beneath the bright neon lights, Maya stirred awake. "I'm hungry. Are we home yet?" she asked. "Not yet, love. We still have a long way to go, but there's a diner here, and we can all take a little break." The bell above the door jingled as they entered, drawing the attention of the few late-night patrons. A tired-looking waitress approached, her eyes widening slightly at Rowan's bruised face. "Rough night?" she asked, sympathy in her voice. Rowan chuckled softly. "You could say that. Table for 3, please." As they settled into a booth, Maya between Agnes and Rowan, the waitress returned with menus. "Can I get you folks something to drink while you decide?" Agnes ordered coffee for herself and Rowan, and a glass of milk for Maya. As the waitress walked away, Maya tugged gently on Agnes's sleeve. Can I have steak?" she asked hesitantly. "And corn. I remember, I used to like that." Agnes reminded herself of Maya's nutritional needs and nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. High-protein diet, just like Loris mentioned. Order whatever you'd like." When the waitress returned with their drinks, Agnes placed their order, making sure to emphasize that Maya's steak should be well done and tender. The waitress, noticing Rowan's bruises again, offered to bring some ice. Before Agnes or Rowan could respond, Maya spoke up, a hint of pride in her voice. "My dad is a hero," she said, looking at Rowan with admiration. "That's a hero wound." The word dad hung in the air, filled with the weight of newfound trust and connection. Agnes and Rowan exchanged a tearful glance, overwhelmed by the simple word. The waitress's eyes held a hint of confusion. Perhaps it was unusual to see an older couple with a very young child calling him Dad instead of Grandpa. The waitress smiled warmly nonetheless. "Well then," she said, "your dad must be an awesome man." As she walked away, Rowan raised his coffee mug. "To new beginnings," he said softly. Agnes and Maya joined in the toast, their glasses clinking gently. As they sat there, sharing a meal in the quiet diner, Agnes felt a sense of peace settle over her. They had a long road home ahead, but in this moment, with her family safe and together, she knew they could face anything. The house was dark and quiet when they finally pulled into the driveway, the events of the day feeling like a distant, surreal dream. As Rowan unlocked the front door, Agnes guided a sleepy Maya inside, the familiar surroundings a welcome sight after their ordeal. "Let's get you to bed, sweetheart," Agnes said softly, leading Maya up the stairs. "It's been a long day." In Maya's room, Agnes helped the tired girl change into pajamas and tucked her into bed. As she pulled the covers up, Maya caught her hand. "Agnes, Mom," Maya said, her voice heavy with sleep but tinged with a new warmth. "Thank you for coming to get me, for bringing me home." Agnes felt tears prick her eyes as she leaned down to kiss Maya's forehead. "Always, my love. This is your home now and you're safe here. Sleep well." As Maya's eyes drifted closed, Agnes lingered for a moment, watching the steady rise and fall of the girl's chest. The events of the day washed over her, the fear, the desperation, the relief, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This child who had been through so much was now theirs to protect and nurture. Downstairs, she found Rowan in the living room, a glass of water in his hand as he stared out the window. He turned as she entered, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "How is she?" he asked softly. Agnes moved to stand beside him, leaning into his solid presence. "Asleep. I think the events of the day finally caught up with her." Rowan nodded, wrapping an arm around Agnes's shoulders. "It caught up with all of us, I think." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Agnes spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We could have lost her today, Rowan. If we hadn't found that address—" Rowan tightened his hold on her. "But we did find it, and we got her back. That's what matters now." Agnes nodded, turning to face her husband. "You were so brave today. When Michael had that gun, I was terrified." A small smile played at the corners of Rowan's mouth. "Guess those old boxing reflexes came in handy after all." Agnes chuckled softly, the sound breaking some of the lingering tension. "My hero," she said, only half joking. As they stood there, holding each other in the quiet of their home, Agnes felt a shift. The house that had once felt too big, too empty, now felt just right. It was filled with something it had been missing, the promise of a future, of a family growing and healing together. "You know," Rowan said after a while, "I think this new year really has marked a new beginning for us, all of us." Agnes nodded, thinking of Maya sleeping peacefully upstairs. "It won't be easy," she said. "Maya has been through so much. It will take time for her to heal, to truly feel safe." "We'll be there for her, every step of the way," Rowan replied, his voice firm with conviction. "Whatever she needs, however long it takes." "We'll be there for her every step of the way," Rowan replied, his voice steady with conviction. "Whatever she needs, however long it takes." With a quiet nod, Agnes switched off the lights and together they made their way upstairs to their bedroom. As they passed Maya's room, they paused, taking a gentle peek inside. She was fast asleep, her small form curled peacefully under the blankets. Agnes and Rowan exchanged a soft smile, then quietly closed her door, sealing in the warmth and safety of their home.